CRM tutorials. Today we'll be talking about events. This is the fourth and final video of the events tutorial series. The purpose of this tutorial is to understand different ways in which you can check in guests to an event using CRM. The first step is updating the event status. Then we'll discuss checking in guests individually, adding walk-ins, and lastly how to check in all guests at once. Let's begin. Here we are on the CRM homepage. The first thing I'm going to do is go to the Events tab and select our event. Now that we are in our event, I'm going to click on the guest list. Here we see all the folks we've invited and also the people who are added as alternates or additional guests when their invited guest RSVP'd. Now that the event is about to begin and we'd like to start checking in guests, the first thing that we need to do to our event is edit the event status from open to check-in status. I'm going to click Edit, then select Check-in as the status and click Save. We see that the status has changed to Check-in, but we still may need to refresh the page for the guest list to update. So let's go back to the guest list. And now we notice a couple things are a little bit different here. So if we scroll down, we'll notice the actual guests have not changed. However, rather than saying Add Guest near the top, it says Add Walk-in. And instead of the option to remove next to each guest, it says Check-in Guest, since we changed the event status to Check-in. Before diving into the details, I want to briefly describe the different options that you have to check in your guests. As we see here, you can use the button next to each individual guest. We can add walk-ins with the Add Walk-in button for people who attend but may not have originally been on the guest list. We can also select one of our guests and click Check in All if we have guests with additional attendees all arriving at once. Another way to check in guests is using the QR code. This requires a mobile device with the Salesforce One app and QR code reader app, so we will not be walking through those steps within this tutorial. There is a detailed quick reference guide on the CRM homepage for you to use. Additionally, you may choose offline check-in. This is useful if your event is in an area with poor connectivity. Offline check-in access is restricted, however, and requires another mobile app to perform the check-ins. If you need access to offline check-in, you should contact the customer support desk and they will provide additional guidance. Now let's get back to the example we have here. Our first guest has just arrived and they tell us their name. We can scroll down and toggle between pages to look for their name, or use the search bar to find our guest. Once we find that person, we can simply click Check-in Guest. Instantaneously, we see the response status of the guest has changed to Attended. You'll also notice the button next to the contact changes from Check-in Guest to Undo Check-in. So if we check someone in by accident, we can always click Undo Check-in. Then we'll see their response status change back to what it was before. Next, you may want to add walk-ins. Let's say we have some additional folks who've arrived, but we're not on the guest list. We want to track accurate attendance, so we click Add Walk-in. Here, it gives you two options, generic walk-in and detailed walk-in. A generic walk-in is used if we have multiple guests who are walking in at the same time, and we don't necessarily care what their name or contact information is. We really just want to track the total number of people who are walking into this event. So, if we select generic walk-in and click Next, all it asks for us to do is enter a number of walk-ins. I'll enter 5 as an example and click Next and Finish. You may need to refresh the page for the guest list to update. Then, if we take a look at our guest list now, at the very end here, 5 walk-ins have been added. A couple things to note. Because these were generic walk-ins, the system automatically populates their first and last name as walk-in. You'll also notice the response status is Attended and the guest category is walk-in. Now let's say another person walks in and it's someone that we want to know that they specifically attended this event. We will add them, of course, but this time we'll click Add Walk-in and select Detailed Walk-in. Here we can add their first name, last name, email, and/or phone number if we want to track that information for the guest. Again, you may need to refresh the page if changes do not immediately appear in the guest list. Now we have another guest and we see their first and last name. We also see their response status is attended, and of course, their guest category is walk-in. Something I would like you to keep in mind, if you wanted to add these walk-ins as contacts within CRM, you would have to do so separately. Adding a detailed walk-in into your event does not mean that this contact will be created in CRM. It will only appear as a guest on this event. Okay, now let's look at checking in multiple guests at once. If one of our guests chose to bring multiple additional guests on their RSVP, and/or they came with additional folks, we can select one of those guests and click Check in All. This gives us the option to check in all guests related to the one we select, or we can pick and choose by selecting Check in Selected Guests. I'm going to select Check in All Guests and click Next. This next page asks if they have any additional walk-in guests to check in alongside the main invitee and their listed guests. This would be a scenario where one of our invited guests brings another person they didn't include in the RSVP. They'll end up being marked as a walk-in, but will still be associated with the invited guest. I'm going to select Yes and enter their information. If there's more than one walk-in with this invitee, you may continue to add more one by one. I'm going to select No and then click Next and Finish. You may need to refresh the page once more to see the changes. So let's take a look at the invitee I just checked in with his related guests. Not only is the response status changed to attended, but also you'll notice when we select this guest, the additional guest and walk-in we added are here as their related guests, and also their response status is attended with different guest categories. These were all the ways in which you can check in guests for your event. This concludes our CRM tutorial. For additional resources, you can visit CRM HQ, which has all CRM related news and updates. Resources, which you can find on the CRM homepage as well. This includes the user guide, QRGs, videos, and more. And lastly, you can contact our customer support desk at iipsupport@state.gov for any additional questions or issues that you have around CRM. If you require further support or would like to provide additional feedback, please do get in touch with IIP Office of Digital at state.gov. Thanks for watching.